The Byzantine Empire, a beacon of civilization for over 1,000 years, was entering its final twilight hours. Once the master of the Mediterranean, its dominion had shrunk dramatically over the centuries, worn down by relentless wars, internal strife, and the slow erosion of its territories. By the year 1453, the once mighty empire was but a ghost of its former glory, a small island of Christianity in a rising sea of Ottoman power. Its domain consisted of little more than the ancient city of Constantinople itself, a few islands in the Aegean, and the despotate of the Morea in Greece. The city, a treasure house of classical knowledge and Christian relics, was a prize coveted by many, but none more so than the young Ottoman Sultan. Sultan Mehmed II, a man of formidable intellect and unyielding ambition, had ascended to the Ottoman throne for the second time just 2 years prior. From his youth, he had been singularly obsessed with one goal: the conquest of Constantinople. He saw the city not just as a strategic asset, but as a fulfillment of Islamic prophecy and the ultimate symbol of his own power. His advisors who urged caution, he was resolute, believing the city was a rotten fruit ready to fall into his hands. He spent 2 years meticulously planning his campaign, gathering a force of unprecedented scale and power. His army was a vast and diverse host, with estimates ranging from 80,000 to as high as 200,000 men, including elite infantry, cavalry, and auxiliary troops. This formidable force was a stark contrast to the city's meager defenders. But Mehmed's true trump card was his revolutionary artillery corps. He had enlisted the services of a brilliant but opportunistic Hungarian cannon founder named Orban. Orban had initially offered his skills to the Byzantines, but they could not afford his exorbitant price. Mehmed, however, welcomed him with open arms and provided him with unlimited resources. The result was the creation of a series of monstrous cannons, the likes of which the world had never seen. The most famous of these was the Great Turkish Bombard, a colossal bronze tube nearly 27 feet long. This behemoth required hundreds of men and a team of oxen to move into position. It could fire enormous stone projectiles, each weighing over 1,200 pounds, across a distance of more than a mile. The purpose of this superweapon was singular: to pulverize the legendary Theodosian walls, which had protected Constantinople from every attacker for a millennium. On the other side of the wall stood Emperor Constantine Varbinocus, the last sovereign of the Roman Empire. He was a tragic figure, a brave and noble leader who inherited a crown of thorns and a dying empire. He knew the situation was desperate, a true David and Goliath struggle. His army numbered a mere 7,000 to 8,000 men, a pitifully small force to defend over 40 miles of fortifications. This small band of defenders was a mix of his own Byzantine soldiers, armed citizens, and a crucial contingent of foreign volunteers. Among these volunteers, the most prominent was Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, a charismatic and experienced soldier of fortune from Genoa. He arrived with 2 ships and 700 heavily armed professional soldiers, a significant addition to the city's defense. Constantine Levin immediately appointed him commander of the land walls, recognizing his expertise in siege warfare. The city's hopes rested heavily on the courage of its few defenders and the strength of its ancient fortifications. The emperor sent desperate pleas for aid to the Christian kingdoms of Europe, but help was slow to come, hindered by political rivalries and religious divisions between the Catholic West and the Orthodox East. On April 2nd, 1453, the vanguard of the Ottoman army appeared before the city's gates, and the final siege of Constantinople began. Mehmed II arrived with his main force a few days later, on April 6th, and the city was soon completely encircled by land, The Ottoman fleet, numbering over 100 ships, established a blockade of the Bosphorus. Though they were initially unable to penetrate the Golden Horn, the city's main harbor, a massive iron chain, a testament to Byzantine engineering, stretched across the mouth of the inlet, preventing the enemy ships from attacking the weaker sea walls within. The bombardment started almost immediately. The ground shook as Orban's great cannon and dozens of other artillery pieces began their relentless assault on the land walls. The noise was terrifying, a constant, thunderous roar that echoed through the city day and night. The Great Bombard, though slow to load, was devastatingly effective. Each impact sent shockwaves through the ancient stones, blasting away sections of the outer wall and sending clouds of dust and debris into the air. The defenders, under Giustiniani's skilled direction, worked tirelessly to counter the threat. Under the cover of darkness, men, women, and children would swarm to the breaches, frantically repairing the damage with rocks, timber, and barrels of earth. They fought with incredible tenacity, repelling the initial Ottoman infantry assaults that tested the weakened defenses. For several weeks, a grim routine set in. The Ottomans would bombard the walls by day, and the Byzantines would repair them by night. The defenders' courage and Giustiniani's leadership managed to frustrate Mehmed's attempts to achieve a quick victory. A brief flicker of hope ignited in the city on April 20th. 4 Christian ships, 3 from Genoa and 1 Byzantine vessel carrying vital grain, were spotted sailing towards the city. The entire Ottoman fleet moved to intercept them. The population of Constantinople watched from the sea walls, their hearts in their throats, as a desperate naval battle unfolded. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the taller, heavier Christian galleons fought with superior seamanship, repelling the Ottoman attacks and breaking through the blockade to reach the safety of the Golden Horn. The sight of the ships entering the harbor, their flags flying, sparked a brief but wild celebration within the besieged city. This victory, however, only hardened Mehmed's resolve. Enraged by the failure of his navy, he conceived a plan of breathtaking audacity, a feat of engineering and logistics that would seal the city's fate. If he could not sail his ships into the Golden Horn, he would bring them there by land. He ordered his engineers to construct a massive roadway of greased wooden logs and rollers up and over the hill of Galata, the Genoese colony that stood across the harbor. In a single night, on April 22nd, his army performed a seemingly impossible task. Under the cloak of darkness, thousands of men and oxen worked in eerie silence to haul dozens of smaller Ottoman warships out of the Bosphorus, up the steep hill, and down the other side, launching them directly into the waters of the Golden Horn. The Byzantines awoke to a horrifying sight. An enemy fleet now sat in their protected harbor, completely bypassing the Great Chain. The strategic situation had changed overnight. The defenders were now forced to stretch their already thin forces to guard the vulnerable sea walls, which had never been designed to withstand a serious assault. The psychological blow to the city was immense. The miracle they had prayed for seemed to have been answered by an even greater feat of enemy ingenuity. The siege intensified. Ottoman cannons were moved onto pontoon bridges constructed in the Golden Horn, bringing the sea walls under direct fire. Mining operations began, with Ottoman sappers digging tunnels to try and collapse sections of the land walls from beneath. Byzantines, led by the Scottish engineer John Grant, countermined effectively, leading to desperate, blind struggles in the darkness underground. As May wore on, the situation inside the city grew more desperate. The relentless bombardment had reduced long sections of the outer wall to rubble. Food supplies were running dangerously low. and the constant strain and fear were taking their toll on the population. The defenders were exhausted, their numbers dwindling daily from the fighting and attrition. Hope began to curdle into despair. The once bustling streets of the magnificent city grew quiet, filled with a sense of impending doom. Mehmed, sensing the end was near, offered a final chance for surrender. He promised to spare the lives of the citizens and allow the emperor to retire to a governorship in the Morea if the city was handed over peacefully. Constantinople, in a display of defiant courage, sent back his reply. He thanked the Sultan for his offer of peace, but declared that he could not give him the city. As to surrendering the city to you, he wrote, it is not for me to decide, or for any of its citizens, for all of us have reached the mutual decision to die of our own free will, without any regard for our lives. The die was cast. Mehmed ordered his army to prepare for a final, all-out assault. The date was set for May 29. Throughout the Ottoman camp, preparations were made for the attack, with promises of 3 days of unlimited plunder to galvanize the troops. The air buzzed with anticipation and bloodlust. Inside Constantinople, the mood was one of solemn resignation and final prayers. The haunting sound of church bells tolled across the city, not in alarm, but as a funereal call. On the evening of May 28th, one of the most poignant moments in the city's long history took place. In the magnificent Hagia Sophia, the grandest church in Christendom, a final liturgy was held. For centuries, the Orthodox Greeks and the Catholic Latins have been bitterly divided by the Great Schism. On this last night, those divisions melted away. Greek priests, Italian soldiers, Genoese mercenaries, and Byzantine nobles stood side by side, sharing in the holy rites. It was a moment of profound and tragic unity in the face of shared annihilation. Emperor Constantinople was there, praying with his people. He delivered a moving speech to his commanders, urging them to fight bravely for their faith, their country, and their families. He asked for their forgiveness if he had ever offended them. They, in turn, pledged their loyalty to him unto death. After the service, he returned to the Blachernay Palace for a final farewell to his household before riding out to the walls, a solitary emperor ready to meet his destiny. He would take his final stand, not as a ruler in a palace, but as a soldier among his men. In the dead of night, just after 1:00 a.m. on Tuesday, May 29th, 1453, the final assault began. A deafening roar erupted from the Ottoman lines as thousands of drums and trumpets sounded the charge. The first wave of attackers consisted of the Başıbozuk, irregular auxiliary troops. They were poorly armed but numerous, and their purpose was simple: to absorb the first wave of Byzantine defense and exhaust the defenders. They swarmed towards the breaches, carrying scaling ladders, but were met with a hail of arrows, stones, and Greek fire. The defenders fought with the fury of desperation, and the first wave was cut down and repelled with heavy losses. The second wave followed without pause. This consisted of better-equipped Anatolian regiments who attacked the same heavily damaged section of the wall in the Lycus Valley. The fighting was ferocious and hand-to-hand, a chaotic struggle illuminated by torches and the flash of Greek fire. The defenders, though weary, held their line, their armor splattered with blood, their swords and spears working tirelessly in the darkness. Giustiniani was everywhere, a pillar of strength, his commands rising above the din of battle, inspiring his men to hold their ground against the relentless tide. Finally, as dawn approached, Mehmed played his final card. He unleashed his elite corps, the Janissaries. These were the best soldiers in the Ottoman army, disciplined, heavily armed, and fanatically loyal to the Sultan. They advanced in disciplined columns, a seemingly unstoppable force, marching towards the weakest point in the defenses where the Great Bombard had done its worst work. The fighting reached a fever pitch of intensity. The exhausted defenders, having already fought for hours, now faced the freshest and most formidable of their foes. It was at this critical moment that disaster struck. Giovanni Giustiniani, the heart and soul of the defense, was grievously wounded. A piece of shrapnel or a crossbow bolt pierced his breastplate, and he collapsed in agony. His men, seeing their commander fall, carried him away from the front line to a ship in the harbor. His departure, however, created a vacuum of leadership and a wave of panic. The Genoese soldiers, disheartened by the loss of their leader, began to fall back, and a critical gap opened in the defensive line. Simultaneously, another moment of misfortune sealed the city's fate. A small contingent of Janissaries, probing the defenses further north, discovered a small, unlocked gate in the wall known as the Carcoporta, or Circus Gate. It had been either forgotten in the chaos or left unsecured by a patrol. A handful of Ottoman soldiers slipped through, quickly overpowered the few guards, and climbed a nearby tower. They unfurled the Ottoman standard, its crescent moon stark against the morning sky. From the top of the Byzantine wall, the sight of the enemy flag flying inside the city was the final, fatal blow to the defenders' morale. The cry, "The city is taken," echoed along the walls, spreading panic and despair. The defense, which had held so heroically for so long, collapsed completely. Ottoman soldiers now poured into the city from all sides, through the Carcoporta, through the breaches in the land walls, and over sections of the wall with scaling ladders. The organized resistance dissolved into a desperate, chaotic flight. Emperor Constantine Despaladiologos, saying that all was lost, reportedly cast off his purple imperial regalia, keeping only his sword. He was last seen leading a final, desperate charge into the oncoming flood of Janissaries near the gate of St. Romanus. He fought and died as a common soldier, disappearing into the maelstrom of the final battle. His body was never conclusively found, though some accounts say he was identified by his purple boots. His heroic death transformed him into a martyr and a legendary figure, the marble emperor who would one day return to reclaim his city. The fall of the walls was followed by 3 days of unimaginable horror. As Mehmed had promised, the city was given over to his soldiers for plunder. A wave of destruction and brutality washed over Constantinople. The soldiers, drunk on victory, rampaged through the streets, killing indiscriminately. Men, women, and children were slaughtered in their homes and on the streets. Churches and monasteries were looted, their sacred relics desecrated, their gold and silver stripped away. Thousands of terrified civilians had sought refuge in the Hagia Sophia, believing its sacred walls would protect them. The soldiers broke down the great bronze doors and swarmed inside. The vast cathedral, which had just hours before hosted a unified prayer, became a scene of massacre and enslavement. The elderly and infirm were killed, while the younger men, women, and children were bound together and led away to be sold into slavery. The great church itself was stripped of its priceless icons, mosaics, and liturgical treasures. Ancient libraries containing irreplaceable manuscripts from the classical world were put to the torch. The accumulated knowledge of 1,000 years went up in smoke. Statues that had adorned the city since the time of the Roman Empire were toppled and destroyed. The wealth of the world's richest city was systematically looted and carried away. It was a catastrophic cultural loss for humanity. On the afternoon of the first day, Sultan Mehmed II, now forever known as Fatih Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, made his grand, triumphal entry into the city he had so long desired. He rode his white horse through the Adrianople Gate and proceeded slowly through the devastated streets towards the heart of the city. He was reportedly moved to tears by the scale of the destruction his army had wrought. Reaching the Hagia Sophia, he dismounted, entered the great building, and ordered that it be immediately converted into a mosque. An imam ascended the pulpit and recited the declaration of Islamic faith, symbolizing the city's new identity. The Fall of Constantinople was an event that reverberated across the known world. It marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, the final chapter in the 1500-year history of the Roman Empire. For the Christian world, it was a devastating blow. The news was met with shock and horror in the courts of Europe, along with a sense of guilt for having failed to come to the city's aid. The Second Rome had fallen, and the gateway to Europe now seemed wide open to Ottoman expansion. The conquest had profound and lasting consequences that reshaped the course of history. The closure of the traditional overland trade routes to the east, now controlled by the Ottomans, was a major catalyst for the Age of Discovery. European nations, particularly Portugal and Spain, were forced to invest in finding new maritime routes to Asia. This led directly to Vasco da Gama's voyage around Africa to India and Christopher Columbus's fateful journey across the Atlantic in search of a westward passage. Furthermore, the exodus of Greek scholars from Constantinople, which had begun even before the siege, accelerated dramatically after its fall. These refugees fled to Italy and other parts of Western Europe, bringing with them a treasure trove of classical Greek manuscripts and a deep knowledge of ancient philosophy, science, and art. This influx of learning was a critical factor in fueling the intellectual and artistic ferment of the Renaissance, which was already underway. The fall of the city, in a strange twist of fate, helped to birth the modern world. Mehmed the Conqueror, in turn, set about transforming his new prize,